Today we are looking at Dhammapada verses 273 to 276, which read as follows. Maggānaṭṭhaṅgiko seṭṭho saccānaṃ caturo padā, virāgo seṭṭho dhammānaṃ, dvipadānañca cakkhumā, eseva maggo natthañño dassanassa visuddhiyā, etañhi tumhe paṭipajjatha, mārassetaṃ pamohanaṃ, etañhi tumhe paṭipannā, dukkhassantaṃ karissatha, akkhāto vo mayā maggo, aññāya sallakantanaṃ, tumhehi kiccamātappaṃ, akkhāto tathāgata, paṭipannā pamokhanti jayino mara bandhana. 4 verses, which translates as, of paths, the eightfold is the greatest. Of truths, the 4 ones. Dispassion is the greatest of dhammas, and of those with 2 legs, the ones with eyes. This indeed is the path, there is no other, for the purification of view, of vision, for the purification of vision. May you practice this path. It is the confounding of Mara. Once you have practiced this path, you will make an end to suffering. This path is taught to you by me, having seen the piercing of the dart. It is for you to exert yourselves in the duty, in this duty. The Tathagatas just show the way. Those who have practiced, the meditators, the ones who meditate, will become free from the bonds of Mara. So a lot in there. These verses were taught to a group of monks when the Buddha was living in Jetavana. Jetavana is the place where the Buddha spent most of his enlightened life. And so monks from all over the country would come to see the Buddha, or having ordained with the Buddha, would go traveling throughout the country. And it so happened that at this time, a group of monks had just returned from traveling all around the country. And they had returned to Jetavana and were sitting in the assembly hall. And they were talking about their travels. The subject came up about the different roads that they had taken. And so they were sharing their information, letting each other know the condition of the roads. They would say, this road is straight and smooth, this road is bumpy, this road is dangerous, this road is safe, this road is full of rocks, this road is smooth. Talking about the different paths. Right? And the Buddha, as he was wont to do, was spending his morning considering who he would teach that day. And it came into his mind that there were these monks who had returned from their travels and had been practicing well, and they would be receptive of his teachings. He acknowledged to himself that they were ready to hear his teachings. And so he left his kuti and walked to the assembly hall and sat down on a seat they had prepared for him, and he asked them, what were you talking about? This is the This is the way the conversation always goes. What were you talking about when you were just sitting here? And he knew what they were talking about. He had this special ability to, well, many special abilities to know these sorts of things, but it's a way of opening the conversation. So he asked them, what were you talking about? And they told him. They said something very practical. We were talking about practical, useful things, talking about the paths that we had taken and their conditions, so that those who go on those paths in the future will know the conditions and will be able to prepare accordingly. But the Buddha was having none of it. And he said to them, this is not what you should be talking about. These paths are not the important paths. Worldly paths like this are not the best use of your time to be discussing. And then he taught these verses. So the story makes it sound in some ways that the Buddha was critical of these monks. And I think there was a light criticism in the sense that it's his job as the teacher to encourage them to not waste their time, their precious time, being born a human being, being ordained as Buddhist monks, and having their minds ripe to understand the Dhamma. It's possible to be in a position where you're able to understand the Dhamma but never have the opportunity or never take the opportunity. And so even though you might be a great human being with many great qualities, if you never take the opportunity, you'll never reach the goal. And so there's a slight criticism, but I think the main thrust of what he's saying is not a criticism, it's more the taking of an opportunity. Sort of like, on the topic of paths, here's something for you to consider. And he taught them these verses, and the verses were valuable to them, that they were able to apply themselves as a result of just listening to his words and make various attainments. So the story teaches us two things. Two sorts of ideas regarding what's important and what's not important. And so the obvious teaching is that we shouldn't focus on what is trivial, what is meaningless. We shouldn't waste our time, and we should be careful not to talk about things that are useless to talk about. Talking about paths road conditions, travel conditions is valuable, it's practical, but it's not spiritually valuable. It's more of a practical necessity that we have to talk about these things from time to time. But it's important that we don't make that our lives. It's easy when you get into a monastic community to become preoccupied with the life of a monk, the duties and the ways of a monk, and to lose sight of the more important things like practicing the Buddha's teaching and trying to see clearly and become free from suffering. But on a deeper level, there's this idea of the difference between conventional reality and ultimate reality. So the path that the Buddha is talking about is not really a path. It's not something you could point out, go that way. It's obviously not in the world, but it's also in some ways not even not a path in any sense, in any ordinary sense of the word. It's rather a way of looking at the world. It's a way of seeing the world in a new way. So rather than focusing on the world in terms of our life, our necessities, our needs, our livelihood, our goals and our ambitions, rather focusing on the nature of reality. I mean, Buddhism is very much concerned and interested in the nature of experience and the quality of experience, the interactions between the body and the mind, the causes of stress and suffering, and the way to free yourself from stress and suffering. So it's easy to rationalize wasting our time in worldly pursuits, saying, well, I have to be concerned with the conditions of the road and so on. I have to be concerned with my livelihood. I have to be concerned with this and that. And it's very easily, we can make these excuses for ourselves, and our reasoning for why we are getting caught up in the world. But none of it has any true significance in an ultimate sense of reality. Meaning it doesn't matter whether we suffer or find pleasure. It doesn't matter whether we are rich or poor. It doesn't matter whether we have a hard time traveling on a road or have an easy time traveling on a road. All of these things are the sorts of practical and necessary concerns that human beings go through, but none of them have any ultimate significance in the bigger picture. So our concern with the path that we take, whether it be the physical path, whether it be our life goals, our means of getting a job and a family and a home and a car and possessions and security, getting involved in politics and economy and society and all these things, none of it has any meaning in an ultimate sense. Of course, we're just going to get old, sick, and die, and that's going to happen again and again and again. So in a bigger perspective, this is the kind of thing that the Buddha is always reminding us of, is to change our focus and to look more at the nature of our ordinary experience, which has no basis in future or past, no connection or attachment to the future or the past. It's very much in the present moment, here and now, having nothing to do with space or time, but having everything to do with this, with our consciousness, the objects of the consciousness, and the reactions of experiencing the objects of our consciousness, how we like and dislike and react and cling and stress and suffer as a result. So the deeper meaning, I think, of the story is just another reminder for us that in Buddhism we're trying to look at the world in a new way. We're trying to see clearly about the nature of our experience, which takes us out of worldly concerns, which is a reason why coming to a meditation center is valuable and why doing formal meditation practice is valuable. When you're engaged in worldly activities, working or studying or partying or traveling, it's your mind is so preoccupied with all these minutiae, these details about what is the road like, am I prepared for the travel, and so on, that it's very difficult for us to pay attention to our experiences, to what's going on in the mind, to the habits that are arising in the mind, and the reactions and the stress and suffering that we're cultivating. So when we come to a meditation center, we give up so much of the needs and responsibilities and the details of life. Life becomes very simple, and even more when we undertake formal meditation practice. Walking back and forth takes very little preparation. The learning that you had to do in order to learn how to walk was someone showing you, or you're reading in a book, that this is how you walk back and forth. And the sitting is even more so. Sitting meditation is, of course, the best way to cultivate great concentration, because you don't have to do anything. There's very little that needs to be understood theoretically. Very little for you to have to concern yourself with, except for the experiences that you're undergoing here and now. There's no preparation, there's no concern about the future, there's no worrying about or dwelling on the past. There's only here and now, what is happening. And so it's a whole different way of looking at the world. You give up all worldly concerns. This is the idea behind the practice of meditation, that we're going to spend our time trying to understand what is truly worth trying to understand, trying to become proficient in what is truly valuable. And so that's what the verse is meant to explain. What is the path, and what is it like to, what does it mean to practice? What should we practice? How should we practice? Why should we practice? And so on. So it starts off, the verses start off by telling us what is the path. The greatest of paths is the Eightfold Path. Now, most people who know anything about Buddhism know about the Eightfold Noble Path. It really is the greatest of paths. Why? Because it is simple, it is direct, and it is objective. There is nothing in the path about doing this ritual or that ritual or holding this belief or that belief. There's a very practical, step-by-step categorization and enumeration, pointing out of every facet of spiritual life, every facet of reality that you have to address in order to progress, in order to improve yourself, in order to get closer to the goal. So the Eightfold Noble Path: right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindful, and right concentration. 8 parts which can seem like a lot, but can be condensed down to the practice of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. These are the 3 trainings, and the Eightfold Noble Path is condensed to these 3 parts. Either way, this is the noble path. We've talked about this before. This is the path that the Buddha taught. This is the path that we follow. Ethics is, well, we keep many precepts, but more importantly, ethics means the quality of your actions, the quality of your speech. So in the simplest terms, when you walk and you're aware of the foot moving, you have an ethical behavior in regards to your walking. You're not walking thinking, I'm going to kill someone, I'm going to steal something, I'm going to do something good. You're not walking out of greed, you're not walking out of anger, you're not walking out of delusion. You have a pure state of mind. And that clarity, that purity, is the truest form of ethics. Same as when you sit in meditation, watching the stomach rise and fall, you have the ethics, which is free from greed, free from anger, free from delusion. You're training your mind to be in a state that is free from all these qualities. Whereas living in the world, you can be chasing after something or running away from something or doing things out of worry or stress. Your actions and your speech are often impure. And so the purity here is the beginning of the path. The second is concentration, focus. You become very much focused on your experiences rather than being distracted by concerns about the future or dwelling on the past. Your mind becomes very focused on the present as you walk, as you sit. And wisdom means you begin to see the nature of reality. You come to see suffering, the cause of suffering, cessation of suffering, and the path which leads to the cessation of suffering. You see the 3 characteristics. Briefly, most briefly put, simply put, you begin to see that nothing is worth clinging to. You start to see how you cling to things, and because your mind is in focus, because you're here and now, you begin to see the stress and suffering that comes from clinging, from not getting what you want, from getting what you don't want, and so on. So this is the Eightfold Noble Path. This is the path that we follow. It is again free from so much of the superfluous baggage that other spiritual paths. Obviously, this is other spiritual paths add on to their spiritual life. Obviously, this is in relation to worldly paths. There's no comparison, but in relation to other spiritual paths as well, the Eightfold Noble Path is so simple, and so essential that the Buddha said any religious practice that is devoid of the Eightfold Noble Path could never hope to lead one to become free from suffering. This is the criteria for a valid spiritual practice. It has the Eightfold Noble Path there, doesn't it? It addresses all 8 of these things: view, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, concentration, mindfulness, concentration. It doesn't address all 8 of those. It can't be considered to be a valid spiritual practice, or it can be sufficient spiritual practice to lead one to freedom from suffering. So, maggānaṭṭhaṅgiko. The second part is that of truths, the four truths are the greatest. So there are many truths in the world, some spiritual, some not so spiritual. Obviously, not all truths are valuable. There's many facts that we never need to know in this world that will never bring us any benefit or any real benefit. Some facts are just, some truths are just an object of curiosity. We want to know the truth out of curiosity. It makes us feel good, something we like, but has no real practical value. There are other spiritual truths that are spiritual but have no real benefit in an ultimate sense, truths about how to go to heaven, truths about how to live a virtuous life, and so on, valuable truths, spiritual truths. There are also spiritual truths that are not true, that are false. Spiritual claims that are made by other religions. The spiritual claims of all other religions beside Buddhism turn out to be invalid, not based on fact, not based on a true understanding of reality. But the 4 truths that fit the criteria of being true and being essential and being valuable, being sufficient to lead one to freedom from suffering, lead one to the perfect goal, are the Four Noble Truths, which are very simple and very direct. They can be verified as being the greatest because they relate to what is most important: suffering, the cause of suffering, freedom from suffering, and this path to the freedom from suffering. These are the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha taught. They're the greatest because they relate to what is most important. They relate to um, what we all strive towards, which is happiness, which is freedom from any kind of suffering, and relief from the suffering that we find ourselves caught up in this life. So the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths, these two are the essence of Buddhism, really. We practice the Eightfold Noble Path to see the Four Noble Truths. Once we see the Four Noble Truths, we free ourselves from suffering. And so that's the next part. The Buddha says, this indeed is the path. There is no other for the purification of vision. And this reminds us that when we talk about the path, when we talk about the Four Noble Truths, we're talking about seeing clearly. We're talking about this word vipassana, which means seeing clearly the nature of reality. That Buddhism is not about belief, it's not about theory, it's not about just living your life and calling yourself a Buddhist or calling yourself a meditator or a monk. Buddhism is a specific practice, and it's a practice for a specific purpose. The practice of mindfulness addresses this goal of trying to see clearly. When we practice mindfulness, we don't seek out anything, we don't try to change or fix our problems. We seek to understand and to see them clearly. We seek to see that the things that we cling to are not worth clinging to. When we focus on simple experiences, we see how the mind reacts to experiences, how the mind seeks out pleasurable experiences and shies away from unpleasant experiences, and cultivates greed and anger, partiality and aversion to and from things, and creates as a result a great amount of stress and suffering. Leads us to do and say things that hurt ourselves and hurt other people, manipulate others in order to find the pleasure that we seek out, or to free ourselves from discomfort and suffering. We see all this through the practice of mindfulness. Basically, we see the clinging, and more importantly, we see the nature of the things that we cling to as not being worth clinging to. The most important vision that we hope to gain is this, that nothing is worth clinging to. And the practice of mindfulness brings this because it's objective, because this is the truth. It is not a belief. It is not something you have to convince yourself of. It actually turns out to be the nature of reality, that nothing is worth clinging to. Clinging is just not valuable. It's not helpful. It's not beneficial. So you don't have to convince yourself of that. You don't have to seek it out. You only have to look, pay attention to the nature of reality, pay attention to your mind, pay attention to the reactions of the mind, and you'll see that for yourself. You'll see that nothing is worth clinging to. Very simple. I mean, it can be explained in much greater detail, but on the simplest level possible, nothing is worth clinging to. The Buddha said, is all you need to know. In terms of theory, once you've learned this theory, you've learned enough, and you can begin to practice already. So this is the path, is to see this clearly. Eseva maggo. Then the next line, the Buddha said, when you have may you practice this path. It is for the confounding of Mara. This is a way of describing this idea of clinging, this idea of suffering as a result of our experiences. We bring up this idea of Mara. Mara is sort of twofold. One, it's a conceptual, or it's the embodiment of our defilements, of our unskillful, unwholesome qualities of mind. We can say Mara is evil, and where is evil? Evil is in our own hearts, in our own minds. We have evil in every bad habit that we cultivate. It's evil, and we call it evil because it hurts. It creates suffering. It causes us to suffer. It causes us to bring suffering to others. This is the most simplest way of understanding this word evil. It is evil and should objectively be seen as evil because it hurts. It creates suffering. It leads to suffering. Our defilements, our greed, our anger, our delusion doesn't help us, doesn't help others, doesn't help anyone. And the other way of looking at Mara, and the way that the Buddha is talking about it here, is in the same sense as the Christian Satan, which may very well be where they got this idea of Satan from. Mara is the evil one. And it's not just one, there are apparently many, but it's also still symbolic of manipulation, how we are manipulated by the experiences of the world around us. It doesn't take a divine being tricking you or bringing you stress or upsetting you, manipulating you, or any of this, to make us do and say bad things or make us trigger the greed and the anger and the delusion that we have in our minds. All it takes is experiences. Natural disasters can lead to stress, lead to sorrow and devastation and true grief and suffering. Even just ordinary experiences, when it's too hot, when it's too cold, when it's too light, too dark, when we're hungry, when we're thirsty, when we're constipated, when we're sick, as we get old, when we get sick, when we die, all of these things have nothing to do with celestial beings manipulating us. But there are beings that are going to play into this as well. Human beings will try to manipulate us, will constantly be bombarding us with experiences that cause us to stress and suffer as we hear words that we don't want to hear or hear words that we do want to hear and are led to greed and addiction as a result. We give rise to greed, anger, and delusion as a result of our experiences. So this is how we understand why the path of mindfulness is valuable, and it's essentially inherently and exceptionally valuable in dealing with all forms of suffering. Suffering that comes from our ordinary experiences, suffering comes from other beings. If someone says something you don't like, it still ends up just being sound at your ear that is processed and interpreted by the mind and potentially triggers not directly the person or the being triggering it, but the sound itself and the processing itself triggering greed, anger, or delusion as a result. Ultimately, it merely comes down to our experiences and our reactions to them. So again, focusing not on external concepts of people and places and things and beings, the confounding of all Mara, all evil, comes from paying direct attention to our experiences and cultivating objectivity, where seeing is just seeing, hearing is just hearing, feeling is just feeling, thinking is just thinking. And as a result, being completely safe and protected, perfectly protected from all kinds of manipulation and all kinds of suffering. Because there is no arising of greed, no arising of anger, no arising of delusion, no grief, no sorrow, no lamentation, and no evil, not giving rise to evil intentions, to hurt, to respond, to retaliate, to hate, to create enmity towards those who would manipulate us, would harm us, and so on. Mindfulness is so incredibly powerful because of its incredible simplicity. As we start to see things as they are, we become free from Mara. Then the next line, once you have practiced this path, you will make an end to suffering. And so this should already be clear from what I've been saying. Once you're free from evil, you're free from suffering. Suffering doesn't come from external reality, it comes from our responses to it. Enlightened beings can still be physically harmed. They can have their bones broken, they can have their skin penetrated, they can be cut and beaten and bruised, they can be killed in many different ways. But they can never be made to suffer. In fact, nobody can be made to suffer. We suffer as a result of our reactions to our experiences. When you don't like pain, that is the suffering, not the pain itself. Our reactions to things are what entangle us with the world, and it's that entangling that creates stress and suffering as we get what we don't want and don't get what we want. The person who has no wanting, no likes and dislikes, never gets what they don't want or doesn't get what they want, because they have no greed, no anger, no partiality, and no delusion. They see things just as they are. This is the goal, this is the aim, this is the practice that we're undertaking, this simple noting things as they are, being present, cultivating objectivity, seeing things as they are, waking up to the nature of reality. The next line, this path has been taught to you by me, having known the piercing of the dart. So this is something that requires explanation. This is the actual Pāḷi, the piercing of the dart. This is the Pāḷi in the Burmese version. In the Sinhalese and I think the Thai version, it says the extraction of the dart. So a dart is a tool for injecting poison. In ancient times, you may know of these primitive weapons where you put poison on a dart, you shoot the dart through a pipe or by hand, and you poison some human or animal and you kill the animal. So this is the simile, the imagery the Buddha, the symbol that the Buddha uses to describe what? To describe defilement, that we're pierced by the arrow of craving, our yearning, our thirsting, our ambitions, our goals, our attachments. This is like a poison that has been spread by a dart that has infected us or penetrated our being. So the Buddha was quick to remind, or did remind us that the mind is essentially pure. I mean, mind is just mind. What does it do? It knows things. And knowing things is not a problem. Being aware of sights and sounds and smells, there's no danger in that. The danger comes from this, the poison that has been injected, like that is as though it has been injected into our otherwise healthy body. Our mind is otherwise healthy, but when we have this greed, this anger, this delusion injected into the experience, it's like a pollution, it's like a poison that that pollutes and corrupts and destroys, ruins everything. Ruins our experiences. Seeing could just be seeing. Hearing we could be sitting here peacefully. Here we are sitting peacefully, talking about the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma. This could all be completely happy and peaceful and free from suffering if it weren't for poison that has been injected, that is injected in a part and pollutes our minds, which judge things, react to things. This is good, this is bad, which distract us and lead us away from the present moment, get us caught up in concepts and so on. So this is what the Buddha knew. The Buddha reminds that this is the essence, this is the point. The point is that there is this poison, and this is what we're aiming for. This is why he taught it, because he has seen it. He has seen the injecting of it, how it is injected into our experiences and ruins everything. And for the other translation, he also understands taking the dart out, that this is it. All we have to do is take the dart out, take the poison out, free ourselves from this poison, the poison of greed, the poison of anger, the poison of delusion, and we'll be free from suffering. The next line, it is up to you to exert yourselves in this duty. The Tathagatas, the Buddhas, those who are enlightened, only point the way or lead the way. This is an important reminder. This phrase often comes up in Buddhist discourse, this line of these verses. It's a fairly famous one. A reminder that the Buddha cannot enlighten you, your teachers cannot enlighten you, nobody else can enlighten you. It doesn't enlighten you by coming to the meditation center, it doesn't enlighten you by performing Buddhist rites and rituals, or it doesn't even enlighten you to just walk back and forth and sit. You have to apply yourself. You have to undertake the practice of mindfulness. Here we have a very clear practice. There are many ways that are presented of practicing the Buddha's teaching. The practice that we have here is very simple, and it takes effort. It requires the effort of actually reminding yourself. When the stomach rises, you remind yourself, this is rising. It's not good, it's not bad, it's not me, it's not mine, it's rising. When the stomach falls, falling. Simple, easy. It's not a lot to ask, but it's not easy, or it's not it's not accomplished without effort. A person could sit still or walk back and forth without any of that, letting their minds wander, letting their mind go as it will, taking it easy, and get nothing out of the practice. Walk and sit for many hours and get nothing. But you can take 3 steps if you're truly mindful. There was a monk, there's a story of this monk who took 3 steps, and at the end of the 3rd step he was enlightened, because his mind was so ready to apply the practice of mindfulness. So it's the quality of our practice. It's up to us to put up the effort. I mean, you don't have to stress too much about whether you're practicing correctly or not. Again, it's very simple. You just say the word, it reminds you, and you cultivate this clarity, this vision that the Buddha talked about. But there is that reminder, and there's also the reminder of the effort that is required, even just to make it here, to do this practice. To get to the meditation center requires so much effort. And how many people are too lazy, or well, for some people it can be just laziness. Some people who are unable, you cannot fault them because in the present for not being able to come to practice, but some people simply cannot be bothered. There are people all around here living in this village, living in this country, and of course people in the world who have the means to travel but never take the opportunity to go to a meditation center or to undertake the practice. So this is something to be happy about and to appreciate in ourselves, that you've all taken this opportunity to come to practice meditation. And then to actually do the practice. You can come here and it takes a lot of effort to actually get here, but then how much more effort does it take to do an hour of walking meditation, an hour of sitting meditation, or even just 10 minutes of walking, 10 minutes of sitting, whatever you're doing, to practice day in and day out, throughout the day, sometimes throughout the night, to practice walking and sitting, to apply yourself and to cultivate these essential qualities of mind that are so foreign to ordinary experience. This is the right way. This is something to feel happy about, not proud per se, but to appreciate, and to give you confidence and encouragement that you are doing that you're doing something that's not easy to do, and something that's incredibly valuable. And finally, the last line, those who practice, jayino, who meditate, will become free from the bonds of Mara. So this tells us 2 things. One, that meditation is essential. The Buddha brings up this word at the end of his talk as a reminder that you can't just listen to his teachings and you can't just believe his teachings. You can't just call yourself a Buddhist or a meditator. You have to practice meditation. Jayino, this is where the word jhana comes from, meaning meditation. Jayino, one who meditates, the one who has practiced this path through meditation will become free from the bonds of Mara. So the bonds of Mara are the clinging that comes from craving, that comes from attachment. They are the entanglements of the world that we get caught up in, thinking that this or that is worth clinging to, and as a result, getting caught up in such busyness and such stress and ultimately suffering as a result of our entanglements, our greed, our anger, our addictions, our enmities and hostilities, our fears, our worries, our doubts. All of these things are things that keep us bound to the cycle of samsara. They cause us stress and suffering in this life, and they cause us to be born again, to have to suffer this same fate again and again. They keep us caught up in this narrative that we tell ourselves, this is important, that is important, as we get caught up in worldly affairs and follow worldly paths and become obsessed and distracted by these worldly paths, and never undertaking the spiritual path, or the path that leads to freedom from suffering. So this is the teaching that we have for today, the teaching about the path. This is the beginning of the magga, of the chapter on the path of the Dhammapada, relating to the difference between worldly pursuits and spiritual pursuits, and the value, the importance of the path, and what it means to be someone who truly follows the right path, what we should do to follow the right path, why we should practice it, and what are the goals and the fruits that come as a result of practicing the path. So that's the Dhamma for today. Thank you for listening.